Wild West. Although the Scottish independence referendum held earlier this month failed to pass, the impact of that vote extended far beyond the United Kingdom. In fact, in the midst of the campaign, activists from the island of Okinawa traveled to Scotland in order to learn how to conduct their own independence movement in Japan. See, this small southern Japanese island has a dark history that's directly tied to military agreements between the governments of Tokyo and Washington. Okinawa represents about 0.6% of Japan's land area. It is home to roughly 26,000 U.S. troops, or about half of all American military forces in the country. Furthermore, the island is littered with 32 military bases that cover 20% of the entire island, with Japanese and American politicians alike repeatedly breaking promises to reduce the military's presence. Many Okinawans see independence, no matter how unlikely, as their best chance to take back their land. So here to discuss all things Okinawa, I'm joined now by professor and historian Peter Kuznick, who recently traveled to the island with his American University history class. How amazing that must have been. I wish that I could have gone. Let's briefly start by talking about how U.S. militarism has impacted Okinawa.
Well, first Japanese militarism impacted Okinawa. The Japanese seized Okinawa in 1879. Then the United States, there was a big battle of Okinawa, which was the bloodiest battle of World War II in the Pacific. In that battle, from late March to late June, the United States lost 12,000 to 13,000 troops, 70,000 to 90,000 Japanese troops were killed, but 100,000 Okinawan civilians died in that conflict. So the Okinawans were victimized by the Americans and the Japanese during the war in Okinawa. But after the end of the war, Okinawa was taken over by the United States. And the United States used the entire island, really, as a military base until 1972, when it reverted back to Japan. But it has remained a U.S. military base ever since. As you said, 20% of the island is military bases, literally. It used to be, the Marines used to have free run of Okinawa. They still effectively do. So about 80% of the troops in Okinawa are Marines. And before that, the bases were everywhere. Now they've got a lot of bases, but there are some like Camp Schwab and Futenma that are very controversial. So the issue has been what to do about those U.S. Marines. The Okinawan people really want out of there. So the Okinawans are really an occupied people. About 80% of the population of Okinawa is opposed to the base relocation from Futenma to Henoko. Futenma is it's an very urban area, densely populated, and there were accidents there. There was a terrible case of 3 Marines raping a young girl there. There's a lot of crime, a lot of noise, a lot of pollution, Agent Orange being found. So the people of Futenma wanted to get that base out of there, and there was strong protests. And the United States agreed to relocate the base. The United States wants to relocate it to Henoko in the northern part of Okinawa, which is a very pristine, beautiful part of the island. But the people of Henoko are strongly opposed to it. And there was recently an election in January of this year where Mayor Inamine ran on a very strong anti-base platform and got reelected. It was an election in which the government, the Abe administration, threw all kinds of resources, did everything it could to bribe the people of Nago to oppose Mayor Inamine, but he had support from us and others internationally, and he won that election.
Amazing. I hope that we see some real change there through his victory. And talk about how the former Japanese prime minister made a pledge to close one of the bases, and what happened to him?
Well, that was Prime Minister Hatoyama.
Yeah.
Oliver and I met with him the summer of 2013 when we were there. He was, after all those years of LDP victories, finally the Japan Democratic Party won an election. And it looked like we had a reform party there that was going to really make some changes after decades of this conservative rule. And Hatoyama, one of his major promises was that he was going to stop the relocation of the base to Henoko. He was going to support the people of Okinawa in their opposition to this. Obama came in there and basically rammed it down his throat. He said, no, you can't stop that. We have an agreement. Obama humiliated him. He undermined him, undercut his authority, and the government collapsed as a result. And then they've never been able to get any footing since then. And in 2012, Prime Minister Abe, Shinzo Abe, got elected. So the Japan Democratic Party was out of power. The Abe LDP party was in power. And Abe represents a real threat, because Abe is an extreme right-winger who comes from a long line of extreme right-wingers. His grandfather was a former Prime Minister Kishi. Kishi was a former Class A war criminal who was then pardoned by the United States because the United States saw him as an asset. He was such a strong anti-communist. He gets elected prime minister in 1957. Then he's thrown out of office by the people of Japan because he supported the Mutual Security Treaty. He kind of rammed it through, despite all the opposition to it in Japan. It's called AMPO there. That's what they refer to it as. And then Kishi's younger brother gets elected prime minister, I think it was 1964, and he's the one who oversees the reversion of Okinawa to Japan. But he is the one who agrees to allow the U.S. to control the island still. So the Okinawans, you have to understand that they have much more of an aversion to militarism. What happened during the war to them was just horrible. And it was done by the Japanese soldiers, done by the Americans. And so they hate the thought of militarism, and they're mobilizing to do everything they can to oppose it. But Abe is trying to force this down their throats now. The Japan Coast Guard is stopping the protesters. It's a very ugly situation. It's only going to get uglier.
It is, and they've been dealt a horrible hand. And of course, the Asia pivot under Obama is not helping. You and Oliver Stone recently went to Japan. Of course, you just got back as well. You met with the U.S. consul in Naha. What did officials tell you there? And then let's segue off that by talking about the grassroots mobilization on the ground in terms of independence and how realistic is that movement really?
Well, first I'll tell you about the top U.S. government official in Okinawa, Al Magleby. I met with him with two of my colleagues when we were there this August in Okinawa, and he said some interesting things to us. This is a guy who's been flying under the radar. I almost suspect that he wanted us to get this out. And we did, of course. It was front-page news for several days in Okinawa. He said to us that the protesters in Okinawa are not rational, that he can't speak to them, that they're in their own world. They have no sense of the reality of the situation there. What he admitted to was that there are two fundamentally different narratives. There's the narrative supported by the Abe administration and the Obama administration and the U.S. officials for what's happening in Okinawa. Then there's a narrative of the protesters. And the protesters' narrative is that all of these bases are being rammed down their throats. That this is, and we know over 80% of the people there, in some polls it's up to 90%, have said they don't want the bases. They don't want to relocate it anywhere in Okinawa. But they've been acting on it. And it's part of the reason why we supported them so strongly, why Oliver and I went there, is because we wanted to focus international attention on their struggle. This is the front line of the struggle against U.S. bases, right? Chalmers Johnson said the U.S. is an empire of bases, somewhere 700 to 1,000. We don't even know the exact number, how many overseas bases the U.S. has. And so the people of Okinawa are not only opposing this in polls, they're putting their bodies on the line. They're going out there. There's these camps where they protest. They've got their tent communities. They go out to the Camp Schwab. They protest it by the thousands. Day after day after day, the protests are out there. And now the U.S., in order to put the new landing strip there for the base in Hanoko, they've got to fill in the bay. It's a massive reclamation project that's going to destroy the environment there, and they're beginning to do that. The governor of Okinawa...
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm so sorry. No, it is the forefront of really the fight against U.S. militarism. Thank you for going there. Thank you for shedding light on the struggle. We should really check out more what's going on there. Peter Kuznick, historian, really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching, you guys. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Abby Martin. Join me tomorrow when I break the set all over again.